call it life. Go ahead, Greg. I don't know what's going on. I appreciate it. There we go. So, you would think that when somebody comes up with an earth-shattering, culture-changing innovation, that everybody would be just kicking up their heels to go and be a part of it. When Alexander Graham Bell was developing the telephone, he offered to sell the patent to the telephone to Western Union. Now, what was Western Union back in that day?
Telegraph.
Telegraph. And the president, he offered to sell the patent to the telephone for $100,000. And the president of Western Union said, well, that's the dumbest device I have ever seen. Nobody will want to talk to another person over a wire when you can send a printed message to them by telegraph. 2 weeks before the Wright brothers flew for the first time, there was a scientist in London that said that it is quite impossible to fly in a heavier than aircraft, and even if you were going to be able to achieve such a feat, who would want to do such a silly thing? So when Henry Ford was developing the automobile, he did not invent the automobile, we know that. But when he was developing the automobile, he was looking for backers, money, capital. And do you realize he had a real hard time convincing anybody to invest in this newfangled horseless carriage? In fact, we'll try this one more time. Well, I got the green light. There it goes.
I done that.
Oh, thank you, Greg. I'll just turn this off. This is the New York Times quote from 1904. Automobile moves too quickly for the human brain to keep up. The human brain can only operate something like when traveling 8 miles an hour. Anything beyond that results in deadly confusion. The horse is here to stay. Investments in this Ford's company will certainly result in a loss.
Also, about 1890, the guy that was over the patent office
Said.
he wanted to close the patent office and everything that could be admitted had.
That's right. Go ahead, Greg. How about this one? I'm just going to let you read it. Do you think that guy amounted to anything?
The teacher didn't.
Thanks,
His
Greg.
father did.
2007, when Apple was about to unleash the iPhone on the world, the CEO of Microsoft made the statement that there's no chance the iPhone will ever get any significant market share, no chance at all. Next, Greg. A Korean spiritual advisor, let's put it like that, in 1997 made the statement that God will appear on U.S. television on Channel 18. How God decided Channel 18, I don't know. Now there's a bunch of Channel 18s, but this happens to be on the West Coast. Go figure. And God is going to appear on a specific date on March 25th, 1998, and is going to announce that he will be reappearing on earth the next week. And right after that, there will be the destruction of the earth. Oh, by the way, there's going to be a spaceship that is going to be hidden and disguised as a cloud, and for $60,000 a piece, you can buy a ticket on this spaceship and avoid all of this.
I guess he had the tickets.
Go ahead, Greg. In 1813, Joanna Southcott announced that in the next year she was going to be giving birth to the Messiah. Now, you don't recognize the name, but if you had been living in 1813, you would recognize the name because she had quite a following as, again, a spiritual leader. And even though she was 64 years old and she told her doctor she was a virgin, she was going to give birth that next year. She died a couple of weeks later, so that didn't quite work out in her favor. Greg? Mr. Stauffer, who was a German astrologer in the 1500s, predicted that there would be a second worldwide flood, gave the date, February 25th, and there was a German count that even built an ark, a 3-story ark. Well, if it worked once, it'll work again, won't it, Alan? There was light rain that day, but there was no flooding. Go ahead. And it's still a little bit more dark now. Brigham Young, the second president of Latter-day Saints, made the statement that God told him that Ham, do you recognize the name Ham?
Yes.
Okay, what?
Noah's Ark.
Supposedly Ham settled in Africa. Supposedly Ham was dark-skinned. I don't know where they get that from. But supposedly, Ham will continue to be the servant of servants. Now, what does that mean?
Slave.
In other words, the whites going to continue to be slaves as the Lord decreed until the curse is removed. And will the present struggle free the slave? No. Look at the date. 1863. You do know that at the beginning of that year was the Emancipation Proclamation. I guess Brigham Young didn't hear about that. Go ahead. Joseph Smith, who was the founder of that group, made this statement in 1843. The Lord God has spoken that shortly England will invade the United States. You see, he had made several predictions that there was going to be a coming civil war. The newspapers were predicting that. I mean, this is nothing. That's like me predicting George Washington was going to be the first president of the United States. It would be that common of an idea. The Lord God has spoken that shortly England will invade the United States, starting in South Carolina, and General Joe Smith will lead the army in a battle and prepare for the second coming. I guess England is still what? Amassing the troops? It's not happened yet. Go ahead, Greg. What point am I trying to make here?
One thing, uninspired humans make a lot of idiotic ideas, suggestions, and predictions that never take place.
How many times in our lifetime have people predicted the end of the earth, the destruction of the world, the second coming of Christ, every battle? I remember when Desert Storm took place. Well, that was it. That was the beginning of Armageddon. That was going to be the East versus the West. That was going to be the West versus Saddam Hussein. That was going to be the big battle in the desert. However many days after that, it was going to be the second arrival of Jesus. Every major catastrophe, some little group over here or over there is using it to their advantage for publicity. What if they actually got it right? So why does this make a difference? Well, let me show you. Let's take the book of Isaiah. If you Google when was Isaiah written, you're going to get two general dates. The traditional date is in the 8th century BC. Now that's 730s, like that, BC. But there is a modern date for the book of Isaiah to have been written that is 150 years or so later. Well, does it really make a difference?
Yeah.
All right, Bill. Bill says, yes, it makes a difference. Why? Greg?
The reason is, if it was 150 years later, then Isaiah would have already have seen these things happen.
Yes.
A lot of them, yeah.
Yes. Take, for instance, the prophecy of Cyrus. If Isaiah is written in the 8th century BC, that means we have a book 150 years before the destruction of the Assyrian Empire and the rise of the destruction of the Babylonian Empire and rise of the Persian Empire. And names that first great king of the Persian Empire, Cyrus the Great, and tells what Cyrus is going to do. In Isaiah 44, verse 28, Isaiah says that there is going to be a king named Cyrus, and he is basically going to rebuild Jerusalem and start the foundation of rebuilding the temple. So, critics of the Bible have a really, really big problem. If Isaiah was written in the 8th century, 150 years before any of this ever happened. So how is it that Isaiah names the king? How is it that Isaiah names what the king is going to do?
He's inspired.
Well, you mean according to the modern date?
Yes, according to the modern.
Oh. Well, they just say this is somebody that wrote in the 5th century, so
That's
his
right.
name's Isaiah.
That's right. So what modern agnostics do is they say, well, obviously this cannot have been written 150 years before it actually happened. So we want to figure out where we can date it further down the line. Where we can say, oh no, see, this really isn't a prediction, a prophecy. This is just somebody writing as the events are unfolding. Takes the inspiration out of Isaiah, takes the prophecy out of Isaiah. Most bona fide Bible scholars still maintain that Isaiah was written in the 8th century BC. Go ahead, Greg. So, back up. Now, you may be tired of me, but not yet, hopefully. So, topology. It's on the front of that handout sheet. What is topology? Well, basically it's organization, organizing, putting things into groups. Back in biology, 9th grade biology in high school, we all learned order and genus and phylum and species, and you took a little grasshopper and you put it in whatever category it fits in. So you start out with something large, like all of us in this room are classified as mammals. Then you come down to something smaller, a subgroup, then a smaller subgroup, and a smaller subgroup. Some animals have bones on the outside of their body, some animals have bones on the inside of their body, some animals lay eggs, some animals don't. So you're classified according to your characteristics. Now you take that same idea and you apply it into the Bible, and you talk about biblical topology, used to, a long time ago, we call that type and antitype. Do you remember why it's called type and antitype?
It either is or isn't.
Well, we don't print things much anymore, like setting the type. Do you know what a printer's double is? That was the person in the old print shops that had to take the metal and actually, if you had some funny little character that you wanted to print, they had to take that little metal block, and they had to form that little shape and a little type set. And then they had to set the type in little blocks. But you had to do it how? Backwards.
Backwards.
You had to do it backwards.
What you're looking at is backwards to you.
Yes. And then you put that down, basically you put that down, you spread ink over it, you put a piece of paper on it, you press that piece of paper down on that type, you lift that piece of paper up, and there's what you want to read. Okay? First movable press in the 1400s. Printed the Bible, Gutenberg's Bible. We learned that in school. Well, things did not progress much from the 1400s as far as the printing press up into the 17 or 1800s. And then everybody started changing over to computers. Even Jessica Fletcher did on Murder, She Wrote. You remember Murder, She Wrote? The first few episodes, she's there at her typewriter. And then the next several episodes, after the several seasons, she's there at her computer. Okay? So younger people, they don't see the newspaper like we used to. But actually what we read is not the type. What we read is called the antitype. And what is set in the press is the type. So what we find in the Old Testament, remember whatsoever is written in the Old Times is written for our learning? What was written in the Old Testament is referred to as the type. And then what it refers to in the New Testament is the antitype. And at one time, churches preached a lot of type antitype. You don't hear that much anymore. Maybe it's fallen out of favor. I don't know. But here are some examples. Adam, Paul described Adam as a type of Christ, where Adam was the first man. This is in Romans. Adam was the first man. He's seen as a type of Christ, and Paul refers to Jesus as the second Adam, the second first man. Jonah's 3 days in the belly of, you want to say whale, go ahead. It doesn't hurt my feelings if you say whale, and great fish, if you want to say that, go ahead. Jonah in the belly of his marmot is a type of Jesus being in the grave 3 days. The bronze snake in the wilderness, where the Hebrews were being bitten by these fiery serpents, and God told Moses, raise up this bronze snake on a staff. And if you look on it, you're going to be healed, is seen as a type of Christ being raised up on the cross. So that's just 3 very simple examples. There are literally thousands of type and anti-type relationships between the Old and New Testament. Okay? So I want to go to Matthew. And I want to look at Matthew, where we are told that Mary, you're going to give birth to this son, and he's going to be called names he's gonna be called is Immanuel. I'll spend the rest of the time talking about this thing. Somebody find that, I forgot to write the exact verse down, somebody find that in Matthew. This is the angel's announcement to Mary.
Chapter 1, verse 23.
23, read that please, Al. Thank you.
Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Immanuel,
Okay.
which being interpreted is God with us.
With us. Okay. So, what is the angel saying here about Jesus? So, to understand this, we go back to Isaiah. And they'll talk on this a little bit Sunday morning. Let's go back to Isaiah 7. And let's look at the first few verses in Isaiah.
First chapter or chapter 7?
Chapter 7. And in particular, verse 14.
Okay.
Now I'm not going to spend the time on this that I normally would because Bill taught part of this lesson Sunday morning. So what is going on? Okay, Isaiah is writing at a period of time in this part of Isaiah before the nation of Judah is taken into captivity. But he's warning that this is coming. Judah, you haven't kept God's statutes. Judah, you haven't performed the sacrifices. Judah, you haven't kept my commandments. Judah, this time of retribution is coming. Okay? And so, the northern kingdom, Israel, has already been taken into captivity by the Assyrians. And there is a small little area, I guess you just have to say area, that is wanting to rebel against Assyria. And the king, if memory serves me right, the king's name is Rezin, R-E-Z-I-N.
Yes.
And he's the king of this little do-nothing area called Aram. And then the king of Israel, which is a puppet king because Assyria basically controls that area. Pick up. These two get together and they want to rebel, they want to fight, they want to rebel against Assyria, which was a bad idea. But they wanted Judah's king Ahaz to agree to go into the fight. And Ahaz says, no, I'm not going to do it. And so they're now threatening Ahaz. And Ahaz is scared. The people are scared. And God tells Isaiah, I want you to go out to the water supply. Now, Jerusalem, like every city at that day and time, walled city, but where do you get your water? The water supply was actually outside of the city at that time. Well, if you're going to be attacked, if the enemy is going to circle your city, if you're going to be encircled, then you've got a real big problem. Your water supply might get cut off. So he is out inspecting the water supply. And God told Isaiah, go out and talk to him. He's going to be right here by this pool. Go out and talk to him. So Isaiah goes and he tells Ahaz, look, nothing is going to come of this. You don't have to worry. And I'll give you a sign. And Ahaz says, no, I don't really want a sign. And God was not real happy about that. So God said, I'm going to give you a sign anyway. Verse 14, somebody, Isaiah 7:14.
Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Immanuel.
Okay? Now I want to ask you a question. Let's say that this auditorium is Jerusalem. And right outside that wall, and right outside that door, and right outside that wall, and in our backyard is the opposing army around us. If this sign that is being given to Ahaz and the people, that everything is going to be okay, if this is a prophecy of the birth of Jesus, how does that help?
What? How does that help?
How does that help? Here you are, encircled by an enemy army. You need comfort right here and right now. Not 700 years from now. Because notice, God told Ahaz through Isaiah that the help is going to come now. Let's go on and read a little bit. Go on down and read, what is 14? Let's read 15 and 16.
Curds and honey he shall eat, that he may know how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child shall know how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that you dread will be forsaken by both her kings.
Okay, so let's think about this. This virgin is going to give birth to a child, and that child is going to eat curds and honey by the time he knows good from evil. When does a child know good from evil? I guess it depends on the child, doesn't it?
Yes.
But, is that age 35?
No.
Age 20?
No.
Age
3 or 4.
3 or 4? But notice before that, these enemies are going to have disappeared. So this is a telling Ahaz that, yeah, you've got these armies beginning to encircle you, but really soon, they're going to be gone. Okay? So my question is, if this is a prophecy about the birth of Jesus, well, Ahaz's going to be dead and dust by the time Jesus is going to be born. So how does this comfort Ahaz and the people?
You're gonna make it.
Well, you're going to make it, right? Now let me tell you this. I don't know how much I buy into what I'm going to tell you. I will tell you this is pure opinion. But there's more than one commentator that has read this and has said that this name Immanuel, means God is with us, that what's going to happen is that these enemy soldiers, these enemy armies are going to be completely destroyed, and the women that are now pregnant, when they give birth to sons, they're going to name all those sons Immanuel, meaning God is with us. Cody, I don't get that when I read this. I do know they point to pronoun usage here and there, and I have not traced this down, and I'm gonna tell you honestly, I probably not gonna spend time doing it. I'm just telling you what some commentators say. Taking this on face value, there's going to be a woman. Now, let me wrinkle the waters real bad. The original Hebrew here does not say virgin. The original Hebrew says unmarried woman. Okay? The Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the New Testament, written in about 200 and something BC, used the word virgin. And there's a lot of people make a big to-do about that. Okay? But if you were a faithful Hebrew and you were a woman and you were unmarried, what would you be?
A virgin.
Okay. So, a virgin is going to conceive and give birth. But my point is, if I'm waiting for comfort, if I'm wanting something to sink my teeth into right now, those enemy soldiers are outside these walls, and I want something that I can rely on, that I can see, that I can bite into and know, and I need it right now. The prophecy of somebody going to be born 700 years in the future doesn't comfort me very much at all. So is this a prophecy of Jesus? If you want to say yes, fine. If you want to say no, fine. My point is not whether is this a prophecy of Jesus or not. My point is that name Immanuel. Who is going to save us? God. God is going to be with us through this time of what? Suffering. Possible battle, persecution, worry. Now, let's go 700 years in the future.
I got one second.
Yes, sir.
He's talking to Ahab, the tribe of Judah, the house of David.
3 minutes. Go
The
ahead.
house of David.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna leave it at that. What lineage does Christ follow?
Follows the same lineage.
That's it. Go ahead.
So, now we come to Mary, this little teenager. Mary, you're going to give birth, you're blessed among all women, you're going to give birth. This child that you are going to give birth to is going to be called blessed, is going to be Prince of Peace. And he is going to be called Immanuel. So my question, next question, is Immanuel here referring to Jesus in Matthew 1:23? Is that a name? No. It is a description of what he is going to do. What did the name Immanuel invoke? Invoke 700 years earlier. Salvation.
God will be with us.
God will be with us. It invoked salvation. What does Jesus come to earth to do?
Invoke salvation.
Invoke salvation. But not only that, to comfort, to ease the mind, to help the people that are stressed because of an invading army, to help the people that cannot help themselves. The people in Judah at that time under Ahaz could not help themselves. So now you have one that is coming, that's the Messiah, that is going to be the Immanuel, like what happened with King Ahaz and the people 700 years earlier. You're going to have one that is going to come to help comfort, to help save, to help those that cannot help themselves. that's where I wanted to start with this idea of prediction and fulfillment. Because that's what we see in the name Immanuel. This is what it's referring to back in Isaiah. And this is the purpose of the Messiah. Matthew makes more allusions back to, more references back to the Old Testament than the other gospel writers, far more than all of them. And he puts them, groups them together in what some people refer to as prediction fulfillment formulas. This is the first one. That this Jesus, this Messiah, is going to be Immanuel, as we see it back in Isaiah. We'll look at some others. We are not going to bog the class down by going prophecy by prophecy by prophecy. You go to sleep in a hurry. We're not going to do that. But we will look at maybe two more prophecies in particular here about the Messiah and how they are illustrated in the Old Testament and how those illustrations in the Old Testament bring light to the New Testament. Thank you. I've dominated the discussion again. I'm sorry.
If you have your Bible, I would like for you to open it up to 1 Peter chapter 3. I'll find mine while you're looking for yours. I want to start to read in about verse 19 in just a few moments. I want you to understand why Chris introduced this topic of typology. So the next time you have an opportunity to watch an old Western, one of those Westerns where somebody's going to bomb the newspaper because they're printing some stories that the rich guy in town doesn't want printed anymore, so they go in there and you can see that the printer is doing what Chris was talking about. It's got this little metal blot and he's putting it in the right categories and everything, you know. It's all backwards to him. If you could hold a mirror up to that, you could probably look in the mirror and read it. But they didn't do that. They used the ink, put the paper over it, pulled it off, and there was the anti-type. In other words, whatever characteristic is in that little piece of metal, that little blot, that little letter, is now produced. So we're in 1 Peter chapter 3. Let's talk about the time when, during the flood of Noah, during that time. It says in verse 20, that those spirits that were in prison who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine suffering waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. There is also an antitype, which now saves us. Baptism. The word there is antitype. So what was the type? Well, the type was the water. You see, because it says they waited in the days of Noah, which a few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. That's the type. What's the antitype that Peter's getting to? You know, King James says the like figure. New King James here says there is also an antitype. If you want to look at the Greek word, guess what it is? It's antitupon, antitype. Baptism. Well, what is baptism? Well, it's not the removal of filth of the flesh. You might think that's what happened with the people in Noah's time. They all had a bath, right? No. Noah and the others on board the ark were saved by the water. It lifted them up above the destruction that was taking place. This was God's way of keeping them safe, bringing them safe. No, baptism is not the removal of the filth of the flesh. It's the answer of good conscience toward God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So it might be helpful sometimes to have an idea about that type, anti-type kind of relationship, because what was happening, the character of what happened in the flood of Noah and how God saved those people is reproduced in baptism. Because you wouldn't go under the water. Imagine if that were the case. If God could say to Noah, I want you to go down now and go under the water and then come back up. No, you wouldn't do that unless you had a lot of faith in what was going to happen. And it's the resurrection of Christ that gives us that faith. God raised him. God will raise us up, a new creature in Christ. So I digressed a little bit, but it does bear out the point that sometimes people need to see that relationship in order that they have the confidence and faith in the work of God that's taking place when they, by faith, submit into baptism into Christ, into the death of Jesus Christ. You've got to have some faith to go get into the death of Jesus Christ. But here's God at work. It's faith in the operation of the circumcision is made without hands, Colossians 2. So sometimes if you have to think through that, come to a conclusion, might help you make a decision if you've never been baptized into Christ as to why you should. On the other hand, it might lend some opportunities to be able to speak with people about that subject. And it's all about the confidence and faith. And if something perhaps is shaking your confidence and faith about God and His Word and other things, this is a good time to come and get it restored in the way it should be, in prayer with God and asking for that confidence. If you need to do that tonight, we want to encourage you to come as we stand and sing.